Have you ever caught yourself having a full conversation with yourself? Maybe you're narrating your actions while cooking, giving yourself a pep talk before a big presentation, or debating which shirt to wear out loud. If you've ever worried that talking to yourself means you're losing your mind, I have great news for you. Not only is self-talk completely normal, but science shows it's actually a sign of intelligence and psychological health. Let's dive into the fascinating psychology of people who talk to themselves. First, let's establish something crucial. Self-talk is incredibly common. Research suggests that 96% of adults engage in some form of internal dialogue, and a significant portion of people regularly speak their thoughts out loud. You're not weird, crazy, or alone in this behavior. In fact, you're participating in one of the most fundamental aspects of human cognition. The running commentary in your head, and sometimes coming out of your mouth, is your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do. Psychologists distinguish between different types of self-talk. There's inner speech, which is that silent voice in your head. There's private speech, which is when you talk to yourself out loud but not for the benefit of others. And there's social speech, which is talking directed at other people. What's fascinating is that private speech, talking to yourself out loud, isn't just inner speech that accidentally escaped. It serves unique and important psychological functions that silent thinking alone cannot accomplish. One of the most remarkable findings in psychology is that talking to yourself out loud actually improves cognitive performance. A groundbreaking study by psychologists Gary Lupien and Daniel Swingley found that people who talk to themselves while searching for objects in a supermarket found those items faster than people who searched silently. When participants said the name of what they were looking for out loud, their brains activated stronger mental images and memories associated with that object. The simple act of verbalizing, "Where are the bananas?" helps your brain create a clearer search image than just thinking about bananas silently. This happens because speaking engages multiple neural pathways simultaneously. When you talk out loud, you're activating the motor regions that control speech production, the auditory regions that process the sound of your voice, and the language comprehension regions that understand the meaning. This multisensory engagement creates stronger, more detailed mental representations than thought alone. It's like the difference between imagining a song in your head versus actually hearing it. The real sound creates a richer, more vivid experience. Self-talk is also a powerful tool for emotional regulation. When you're upset, anxious, or overwhelmed, talking yourself through the situation helps create psychological distance from intense emotions. Psychologist Ethan Kross conducted fascinating research showing that the specific way you talk to yourself matters enormously. When people use second-person pronouns like you or their own name instead of I, they achieve better emotional control and make wiser decisions. For example, saying, "You can handle this," or "Sarah, you've got this," is more effective than saying, "I can handle this." Why does this work? Using second or third person creates something called psychological distancing. It allows you to step outside your immediate emotional experience and view the situation more objectively, almost as if you're coaching a friend through a problem. This shift in perspective activates different neural networks associated with self-control and rational thinking rather than emotional reactivity. It's a simple linguistic trick that creates profound psychological effects. Children engage in extensive self-talk, and developmental psychologists view this as a critical part of cognitive development. Russian psychologist Lev Vygotsky proposed that children's private speech, those moments when kids narrate their play or talk through problems out loud, represents thought in transition. Initially, children need to hear themselves speak to organize their thinking. As they develop, this external speech gradually becomes internalized as silent inner speech. But here's the crucial point: adults who continue to use external self-talk aren't regressing to childhood. They're strategically employing a tool that remains useful throughout life, especially for complex or challenging tasks. Think about when you naturally talk to yourself most often. It's usually during tasks that require focus, problem-solving, or emotional management. You might talk yourself through assembling furniture, computing a complex math problem, remembering a shopping list, or calming yourself down before a stressful event. This isn't coincidental. Your brain intuitively knows that verbalizing helps with exactly these types of cognitive and emotional challenges. Self-talk also serves a crucial motivational function. Athletes have long understood the power of positive self-talk. Before a big game or competition, you'll hear athletes giving themselves verbal pep talks. You trained for this. You're ready. You're strong. This isn't just empty encouragement. Research in sports psychology consistently shows that positive self-talk improves performance, increases endurance, and helps athletes push through physical and mental barriers. The words you say to yourself literally change what you believe you're capable of achieving. This motivational aspect extends far beyond sports. When you verbally encourage yourself, "Okay, just one more hour of work," or "You can do this difficult thing," you're activating the same neural reward systems that respond to encouragement from others. Your brain doesn't fully distinguish between encouragement you give yourself and encouragement from external sources. Both create similar neurochemical responses that boost motivation and confidence. There's also a problem-solving advantage to self-talk. When you verbalize a complex problem, you're forced to structure your thoughts more clearly and sequentially than when ideas just swirl around silently in your mind. Speaking requires you to linearize your thinking, to put thoughts into grammatical sentences with a beginning, middle, and end. This process of verbalization often reveals logical gaps, inconsistencies, or solutions that weren't apparent in the messy nonlinear space of pure thought. Many of history's greatest thinkers and creators were known self-talkers. Albert Einstein regularly talked to himself while working through physics problems. Writers often read their work aloud to catch errors and improve flow. Programmers frequently engage in rubber duck debugging, where they explain their code out loud to an inanimate object, often discovering the solution simply through the process of verbal explanation. These aren't quirky habits of eccentric geniuses. They're sophisticated cognitive strategies that enhance thinking and creativity. Self-talk also plays an important role in memory formation and retrieval. When you verbally rehearse information you're trying to remember, like repeating a phone number or talking through directions, you create stronger memory traces than silent rehearsal alone. This happens because vocalization adds an auditory component to the memory, creating multiple retrieval cues. Later, you can remember not just the information but also the sound of yourself saying it, providing an additional pathway to access that memory. Interestingly, people who talk to themselves tend to have better self-awareness and metacognition, which means thinking about thinking. When you externalize your thoughts through speech, you become an observer of your own mental processes. You can hear your assumptions, notice your reasoning patterns, and catch yourself in cognitive biases or emotional reactions. This self-monitoring capability is associated with higher emotional intelligence and better decision-making. However, it's important to acknowledge that not all self-talk is beneficial. The content and tone of your self-talk matter tremendously. Negative self-talk, especially when it's harsh, critical, or catastrophizing, can reinforce anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. If your self-talk consists primarily of statements like, "I'm so stupid, I always mess everything up," or "Everyone thinks I'm pathetic," this pattern creates and reinforces negative neural pathways. The good news is that self-talk patterns can be changed through awareness and practice, which is actually a core component of cognitive behavioral therapy. There's a crucial distinction between productive self-talk and symptoms of certain mental health conditions. Talking to yourself becomes concerning when it's accompanied by other symptoms like hearing voices that seem to come from outside yourself, believing the voices are other entities or people, feeling controlled by voices, experiencing severe distress, or having difficulty distinguishing your thoughts from external reality. These symptoms might indicate conditions like schizophrenia or psychosis that require professional evaluation and treatment. But ordinary self-talk, even frequent or loud self-talk, is not a mental health red flag by itself. The key question is, does your self-talk help you function, or does it interfere with your life? If you're talking yourself through tasks, processing emotions, or problem-solving out loud, that's healthy and adaptive. If you're unable to stop talking to yourself in situations where it's inappropriate, or if your self-talk is causing significant distress or impairment, that's when professional support would be helpful. Cultural factors also influence attitudes toward self-talk. In some cultures, visible self-talk is more socially acceptable and common, while in others it's viewed with suspicion or embarrassment. Western individualistic cultures often emphasize internal, private mental processes, sometimes creating shame around visible signs of thinking like talking to yourself. Other cultures have different norms that are more accepting of external processing. Understanding these cultural contexts helps us recognize that self-talk isn't inherently good or bad, it's just one of many ways humans think and process information. The COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting isolation many people experienced actually led to an increase in self-talk. With reduced social interaction, many people found themselves talking out loud more frequently, essentially filling the silence that would normally contain conversations with others. Psychologists noted this was actually an adaptive response, a way of maintaining a sense of social connection and verbal processing even in isolation. It demonstrates how flexible and responsive our self-talk patterns are to environmental circumstances. For people who live alone, self-talk can be especially important for psychological well-being. It provides a form of social stimulation even in the absence of other people. The sound of a human voice, even your own, creates a sense of presence and companionship. It makes a space feel less empty and can reduce feelings of loneliness. Some people who live alone report having extensive conversations with themselves, their pets, or even inanimate objects, and this isn't pathological, it's a creative adaptation to solitary living. Pets are interesting in this context too. Many people engage in extensive verbal communication with their pets, and while we might frame this as talking to the pet, it functions psychologically as a form of self-talk. The pet obviously doesn't understand most of what you're saying, but the act of verbalizing your thoughts, feelings, and plans while addressing your dog or cat serves all the same cognitive and emotional functions as other forms of self-talk. Plus, pets are non-judgmental listeners, which can make this form of verbal processing feel safer and more comfortable than actual human conversation. So should you talk to yourself more deliberately? There's good evidence that strategic self-talk can enhance your life in specific ways. When facing a difficult task, try narrating your actions and plans out loud. When feeling anxious or upset, try addressing yourself by name or using you to create helpful distance. When trying to memorize information, verbally rehearse it rather than just reading silently. When problem solving, try explaining the problem out loud as if teaching someone else. These aren't silly tricks, they're evidence-based cognitive strategies. If you're self-conscious about talking to yourself around others, that's understandable. Social norms do exist, and muttering to yourself during a quiet business meeting probably isn't ideal. But in private spaces, your home, your car, during solo activities, give yourself complete permission to think out loud without shame or self-consciousness. You're not being weird. You're being human. You're using one of the most sophisticated tools your brain has developed for managing cognition, emotion, and behavior. In conclusion, talking to yourself is normal, common, and often beneficial. It's a sign that your brain is actively engaged in processing, problem-solving, and self-regulation. The research is clear: self-talk improves cognitive performance, enhances emotional regulation, boosts motivation, aids memory, and facilitates problem-solving. Rather than being a quirk to hide, self-talk is a cognitive superpower to embrace and use strategically. So the next time you catch yourself having a full conversation with yourself while cooking dinner, don't worry that you're losing it. You're actually demonstrating sophisticated cognitive processing. Your brain is working exactly as it should, using language not just to communicate with others but as a powerful tool for thinking itself. Talk to yourself freely, kindly, and strategically.